Welcome to the first episode of the podcast. My name is KNIVESMONROE, and I'm in Washington, D.C. right now with someone I get to call a dear friend. His name is Dave Knop, and I know him as Knop from YouTube. So I may call you Knop, I may call you Dave, I may call you Knop every now and then, but Knop, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. We just came back from... this is the first time we've ever met.
Yeah, I didn't realize that until about 5 minutes before getting here. I'm like, oh, wait, I've never actually met you in person, so this could be weird.
It could be weird, but I don't think it is. And I got to say, I'm very comfortable in your presence. You look just like your YouTube presence.
Am I taller than you thought I was?
I assume everybody's taller than what they give off on the internet. You were taller than I expected, but
yes,
everybody usually is, you know.
Because you're so short. No,
but
I'm kidding.
I'm tall for a Hispanic.
Yeah, you are tall.
But, man, it's such an honor to meet you. And I produced my first movie in 2012, and I gave you a special thanks in the credit before we even met, before we ever had a conversation, because your YouTube videos, just like Indie Mogul, which is, you know, we were talking about them off mic, guys like you and Film Riot helped me get the balls to make my first movie. So whoa. I remember the first time we talked on the phone, I think I told you that, and I have to tell you again on record, because it's humbling, man. This is to me like the definition of success. I wanted to make something so another filmmaker could watch it and say, wow, and now we're friends. And I care more about that than I do any check that's ever been signed to my name, you know. So, you know, thanks for being my friend, and thanks for responding to a Facebook Live that I made on the Frugal Filmmaking group page on Facebook a couple years ago. And you reaching out was like a bucket list thing for me. I was able to say, wow, now I have Knop on my contact list. Like, that's so cool. So it's such an honor for you to be here, man, and thank you for being on the show.
That's awesome. Though, thanks for having me on. You might have mentioned it. I totally didn't remember if you did. It kind of went over my head maybe. Yeah. I'll have to go back and look. That's awesome. Well, that's the thing I think about where I'm like, I'm making videos. I'm like, does anyone even care about this stuff? Like, I care about it, but that's super awesome to hear that it actually affected you to where you would even recognize it in a film. I didn't even imagine that would actually happen. That's cool.
Yeah, man. And I think you and me both come from a generation of indie filmmakers. I mean, hell, your average 19-year-old with a DSLR doesn't even call themselves an indie filmmaker. That's not even the words that they use. So you and me are still pretty old school, and I think we're cut from the same cloth and a different class of YouTuber that kind of approaches the game with that in mind. Now, I'm curious about a few things. You and me have talked about this before in our casual phone conversations, but just for the listeners, who I think primarily will be creative people, hopefully. Where does your creative journey start? When was that moment, if you can recall, when you were a little kid, when you realized, oh, I like this more than the average person?
That's a good question. Well, it's local to Ohio. There's a show that was up in Cleveland called The Big Chuck and Little John Show. Would it have ever... You've never heard of those two names? Never have. So it was this local, they would say local celebrities, a tall guy, this other guy, he's, I guess, a small person, super short, very recognizable, kind of looked like Mario, big mustache. Well, they would do these skits before their show. So basically on Saturday night, they would have like a Saturday night King Kong movie, and they would have these little, almost like what you would see like Elvira, sort of those little inserts in between the commercial breaks. Well, in their commercial breaks, they did these skits, and when I was a kid... My brother used to film them, or he would hit record on the VCR. So he would record all of them because I wasn't allowed to stay up that late. And so the next day, I would watch them, and I was like obsessed with these skits. I'm like, I want to like recreate this. So that. How
old were you?
That I never really put it to an age. I guess I was definitely like 12, younger than 12 for sure, 12, 13. But we didn't have a video camera, so I couldn't videotape. So my first or only possibility was audio cassette recorder. So I was like Cheech and Chong was another thing that was going around back then, if you remember them. Yeah, I do. The audio stories and stuff. And I'm like, wow, you can actually it'll be like old radio.
They had him on cassette?
I think it was on cassette or CD. I wonder if it was on CD.
Could have been on vinyl.
I don't know what it was, but I had heard it, and I was like, oh, I never thought that you can actually just make the viewer or the listener think they're seeing stuff by sound effects. So we would act out our little skits. So that was the first time where I'm like, oh, I can actually recreate these scenes that I'm seeing on TV. Now, of course, as the imagination of a younger person, I was like, I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Like, when I listened to it, I'm like, this is just like the real video that I just watched. But that would probably be the quickest, earliest thing that I remember. Like, oh, I want to do more of this. I love tricking the audience into thinking they're hearing something that they're not really hearing, and then eventually getting a video camera. Yeah. Took it into that where I'm like, oh, I can. It's a sort of like magic without all the practice. You don't have to learn, to do a real card trick. You got to know what you're doing. But to do a video trick, it's like you just point the camera there and yell off camera and it sounds like you're falling down a cliff. That's perfect. Right. So that was.
Do you recall as a kid receiving any sort of significance or attention from that? Did you ever present them to other people? Like, did you create an audience or anything like that?
That's good. Yeah, that's a good question. I didn't actually. It was like my family was supportive of it, and my neighbor and my brother, we would all sit down and watch our movies that we made. This is later when I got a VHS camera, but I never was really recognized. I used to draw a lot, so that was what I would mostly get recognized for. I'd be like, "Oh, you're going to be an artist someday," and I'm like,
"I see."
But the funny thing was, and I wish I still had these drawings, I would draw behind the scenes pictures. The big airbag that stuntmen would jump into? Yeah. I used to draw that scene. I don't even know how I knew it because there wasn't that much stuff available back then on TV. Yeah. Sometimes at the end of a VHS.
There was like Mad Magazine and cool things in print.
And I would just draw that scene of like, I'd see the camera guy. And so that's the stuff I would doodle. Mm-hmm. But they would just be like, oh, great drawing. Instead of recognizing that it was like all kind of coming together towards video related and filmmaking stuff.
Did you ever showcase any of your little videos to friends and family? Like kind of gather around the living room and be like, ta-da?
That's what's weird. I know. So that's where I think my timidness, would that be a word? Timidness?
Yeah.
Timidness?
Shyness?
Yeah, I was shy.
Yeah.
And so I definitely didn't want that much attention. It would only, actually, I think in some cases I'd be like, I would wait until my parents left, and then it would just be me and my friends, my peers.
Why?
And it would just,
Why do you
I don't know.
I
never really thought about it. I think I was very easily embarrassed. So I thought, I don't want to be embarrassed because I know it's stupid, but I don't want it to be that stupid. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I never really thought about it. It just was like my acceptable way of handling it, where I knew I enjoyed it, but I didn't want to do it for all the fame and glory. I just wanted to be like, I just wanted to make something that I saw on TV.
That's right.
That was sort of my thing, to like replicate something that like, look, I can even do this. I thought that was the cool factor, not, hey, everybody, look what I just did. Dun, 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 dun.
And
big bow.
When you were a little kid, what were some of the things that were going on that time that captivated your imagination? Whether if there were movies, television shows, comics, cartoons, toys, like what were the things that was part of your time?
MacGyver was number one.
Wow.
Now that's not really film.
I don't even know who MacGyver is. I don't know what MacGyver is. I thought MacGyver was like a thing that the Simpsons joked about. That like McBain, they created things inside the Simpsons. Like I didn't know that MacGyver was a real thing. Like there's an actor that played MacGyver. Who is the actor? Like I've never heard of this person.
Yeah, and it's gonna
in pop culture.
Yeah, and people that really are fans of MacGyver,
That's like their Doctor Who.
Yeah, and they're going to be mad at me because I can't remember the actor's name.
Okay.
Which is a really, oh man. But whatever the case, though, as a kid.
I'm not trying to shit on MacGyver. I'm just saying, like, I didn't, like, not one thing comes to my mind.
I think the closest thing would be MacGruber from Saturday Night Live.
Okay. So that was a parody of MacGyver?
That was a parody of the real MacGyver. Now, that's where the problem is. So you would see that out of context, and now or even, didn't they even make a MacGruber movie? I think they did.
Yeah, there's a movie.
So, and even if I said, hey, check this out, here's the link, watch all the MacGyvers, it wouldn't be the same because as a kid, here's a guy that I'm looking like, oh, someday, which is funny to think. I was actually thinking this the other day. I'm like, I'm actually older now than MacGyver was in that show. But as a kid, I'm like, someday I'm going to grow up, I'm going to wear a cool leather jacket, I'm going to figure out how to fix stuff and be like this, sort of like this normal, a superhero that's just a normal dude that just happens to be like kind of smart and witty with his like gadgetry and stuff. But that, even though there was totally no reference to video or filmmaking in that, I was just like, okay, that's who I want to be when I grow up, and I'm going to take that version of myself and I'm going to make movies. Which at the same time, this is going to be real old school.
Wow.
There's a show called The Fall Guy. This is actually old for me. I think it was reruns even as I was a kid, and ironically enough, I just heard a commercial from the actual actor, and he's like, hey everybody, this is The Fall Guy, sign up for Pandora. And I'm like, what? Wow. What are the chances of that? Because he's old. This is old school. the Fall Guy that show completely was based around a stuntman that had all these like adventures, and he was like a crime fighting guy. Because secretly, yes, I loved film, but I really wanted to be a stuntman. I didn't mention that earlier.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was indicative in your drawings.
Yeah, and that's where I was like, I want to make films. I'll do it myself, but I'm totally going to be a stuntman someday. I didn't really lock into the telling the story. I just knew that somebody had to hit record on the camera. I'll do it since I figured out how.
I see.
So anyways, I don't know if I've already lost track of even the question at hand, but those two shows, and then you obviously would have like Knight Rider. So there's like these guys that were older than me that I'm like, okay, these guys are cool guys. And like the Fall Guy, if you ever look him up on the internet, super cool truck. I mean, in the intro, he's jumping, he's doing all the stunts. So and the whole intro song itself kind of describes the whole, and I'm like, this is so cool. I'm going to be him, and I'm going to be like MacGyver, and it's going to be like this cool world I'm going to live in.
Wow.
And I lived it out, and here I am today.
Well, that's funny because flash forward in the future, you made build videos like
drive a CRV.
Like what are like the top 3 that you can think of that maybe got the most attention of like build your own tripod or build your own light stand or build your own fill in the blank for you that you created on YouTube?
And I would call it my MacGyver moment.
Okay.
Is the viewfinder, the LCD viewfinder DIY. It was an idea I came up with, and I was like, I'm going to just do it. You get a container, a baby powder container, you cut it, and you stick it on the back of an LCD screen on the back of a camera.
Yeah, I remember that video when it came out.
And it was sort of a twofold thing, and I guess in a way, and maybe I had a little bit of pride behind it because I'm like, one, I filmed it, had never made one ever. It was the first one I ever made in that video.
Wow.
So I didn't even know if it would work. It was just like, it made so much sense in my mind. So I was like, I am MacGyver because it did work. When I finished the video, I'm like, it actually worked. But in a way, I'm like, I probably should have done a couple.
But that is a MacGyver moment, right? Because he never thinks it's going to work. It just does work because he's MacGyver.
And I was so excited. But that's where I was like, that definitely was one of my ones. I'm like, I actually do have something that I know what I'm doing. And I made another video. It might even came out before that where it was a camera trick for simulating a Steadicam, and you basically stand in the middle, have somebody run around you, and you just kind of, on the tripod, just pan around circular. Well, because the viewer doesn't know you're spinning, all they see is somebody running left to right the whole time. So visually, you don't have the perspective of a circle. You just have visually a straight line. Did you ever get to see that tutorial?
I never saw that one.
That's like my pride and joy.
That's a great one.
It's something. This is what's so weird. These references, because I actually got the idea watching a Gary Shandling TV show.
Okay,
like
which one?
There was an episode where he was on set and the trees were moving in this big circle.
Yeah.
And he was just standing, like acting like he's running, and the trees are moving behind him. And I don't know what the skit or the show is about.
Cool. Yeah.
Well, and I know and this is what's so cool about the internet. I uploaded the video and somebody referenced, there's actually an old director. He might be, I think he might be a Japanese director or a Chinese director, but he actually created that effect that I was talking about, the original one, where you have the actor run around the camera circular.
Yeah.
And in the video it's actually my nephew, he runs through the woods. And so it looks like it's like a perfect way to track somebody through the woods with no Steadicam. Like you just have them run around you and all you see is trees.
Yeah.
It's such a cool effect. And that was another one where I'm like, let's see if it works. And it's the only time I've ever done it, like in that video.
Yeah, I remember those early videos had the attitude of like, let's see if it works. Like, and that was part of the fun. And hearing your influences from day one, being a stuntman meant that you were in front of the camera, but also kind of protected because you're during the highlight reel, right? And the MacGyver stuff, you actually did build, tutorials and kind of props and things like that, and little camera hacks that came out during a time where the modern 21st century digital filmmaker could actually apply these things. And so in a way, you were kind of like this surrogate film school for a lot of people like me that were like, oh, wow, that's a tip that maybe I don't have to pay for because I'm getting it for free. This guy's already doing it, and that was something that I must have subscribed to you. If only we could go back and check. I must have subscribed to you 2010, maybe 2009, 2010, 2011, like right maybe on the edge of the DSLR revolution, which people hearing this might not give a shit about that, but filmmakers of our time, I mean, I'm filming on a DSLR right now. It was filmmakers like you, and I keep saying filmmaker, but whether however you want to identify, like content creator or what have you, but future, fellow makers such as yourself, like, encouraged me to say, yeah, I can do this on no budge. Mm-hmm. And you were carrying that flag for a while in my eyes.
That's so well. So that's where I want to. Let's go back. I know I'm answering a lot of these questions because I want to. Your original question, throw it back at you in that sense. So you would have saw one of my first videos, or maybe a couple of them, or whatever. What was happening for you at that time? Were you already established? Like when did it kick in for you when you said, "All right, here we go. I'm going to do the filmmaking"?
So I can give you the timeline. Between 2004 and 2007 was a very awkward time with the internet 2.0, like where it was at. Like YouTube just came out on the scene, but there was no HD necessarily.
Okay.
And there was no, like, you posted this video recently, and once again, people right now are just dropping like flies hearing this, but stay with me. You posted a video of, I don't know if it was a JVC or Panasonic 3 megapixel or like 4 megapixel camera.
The D-Snap.
I had one just like that.
Oh, cool.
It was just like it. And I bought it off of QVC for $500. I was working at a Church's Chicken. I don't know if they have that over here in Virginia, but in the South, Church's Chicken, right? It's like a KFC. And I'm a senior in high school, and I save enough money and I buy that. Wow. And the memory cards at the time, I believe, were like 256 megabytes.
Yeah, and expensive too at that.
And expensive at the time. Like your average computer had maybe 30 gigabytes of space, and now people's phones have more. Nevertheless, it was like a crude time, and it was awkward where there was no creative middle class. There was no 1080p that was in your pocket, right? So I remember buying that camera. It had 3 options: 1 megapixel video, 3 megapixel video, 5 megapixel video, and it took stills. Mm-hmm. And I bought that, and I did a lot of backyard wrestling stuff with it. But because technology was so crude during that time, my headspace, to answer your question, was, well, I want to make the big movies. I need the big gear. Well, that either involves going to film school or going to Hollywood and, all that stuff. So this was 3 years before it became realistic for people to spend $1,000 and get really, really good quality, like television quality, if you had the right ingredients, the lens and the light and the actors and the space. If you had the right ingredients, like you could pull it off. Your videos came just at that time where it did become practical to have filmmaking of that quality. So then you could kind of be legitimate to the public, right? To the people, to the hometown. You could be legitimized because the quality is good. But then it was about the actual practical implementation of it, the application of, okay, well, how do I pull off a tracking shot? Because now that's even a possibility, digital, high quality HD filmmaking, now that's a possibility, how do you pull off that shot? Because I'm not going to spend $10,000 on a steady cam or whatever, or on tracks. So finding these little hacks that were creative to me was like this whole new genre. It was like a whole new frontier. And I remember it was 2009, 2010, where I remember in between getting that cheapo QVC camera to my first DSLR, in between that, this is terrible advice, and I've never said this in public, and it's shameful, but I remember I must have been like 19, 20 years old, getting credit cards, maxing them out at Best Buy for handycams, and I just never paid them. They eventually fell off, but it was terrible, and I was not being very responsible. But I got handycams, and I took those to its zenith. But that was like my trajectory, was like editing on VHS, getting that digital. It was like my first being in the digital foray was getting that QVC 5 megapixel camera, then getting the handycam, then going to the T2i, which we were talking about off mic. And that's where it started. So for me, that was the headspace of the time, is struggling what was possible.
So I interrupted you earlier because I was thinking when you said it was finally available.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if I'm thinking what you were referring to. What was finally available? Was it depth of field in a DSLR? Was that the turning point? Because like that thing I was saying, it was finally available to make the big boy movies.
Yeah.
To me, it was depth of field. When the DSLR came out, and I was like, wait a second, now my videos actually look like, because that was the whole thing through VHS.
Yeah.
There was like, oh, I'm filming on this Super 8 camera. Why doesn't it look like what the movies look like? And it was, without knowing it at the time, I didn't even know the word depth of field.
Yeah, same
I
here.
just knew I wanted the blurry backgrounds.
Yeah.
So for me, it was that. But is that what you meant, or were you just talking technology?
I
being
think
cheap?
so. I think it was depth of field. You know, if I'm being honest, I can recall the video, and I've talked to, shout out to Cody Weber, who he doesn't know this yet, but he's going to be a future guest on this show. It was one of his videos that I recall seeing on YouTube where the sharpness was sharp as a tack. I know now that he had a Canon 7D with a 50 millimeter 1.4, so I know that now. But at the time, I didn't even know those were the ingredients for the picture. I just thought the camera made it look like that. So when I got my first T2i with the kit lens, I was like, why doesn't it look like that? Oh, I got to spend an extra $100 on a 50 mil 1.8. What does that even mean, and why is that important? Oh, I got to get the right subject and the right lighting conditions with the right white balance, and then film school kind of began for me in 2010. But yeah, so I do think it was the depth of field, the quote unquote cinematic look, which is such a buzzword nowadays. But at the time, you know, it became possible before, and for a, you know, still expensive, you know, for a whole kit. Maybe I think my first kit was, I think $5,000 is being, I think that's being unrealistic, but it may have been, I can't recall if it was $3,000 or how much I spent on my first DSLR in that entire kit. But that was practical. I was working at McDonald's at the time. I was 20 years old, and I was just saving up paychecks. I wouldn't even cash them until I reached my goal. Wow. And then I cashed them all in and got my first DSLR. Yeah, I recall that. And being very upset that...
wasn't it a bummer?
Being very upset that it didn't look like that. The results didn't come out of the box. And I'm still upset about that.
So much work.
9 years later.
Well, and you know what? And this is where I'm not going to like try to justify it, because I know there's this whole thing of like, a movie isn't about the camera you use, it's about the story and all this stuff. Yeah. But this camera looks different. Like, that's where I had the same track record. Yeah. I used to have, there was a video camera that recorded on cassette tape, the PXL 2000. Mm-hmm. That thing came out and that changed my life. But it was black and white, super low resolution. Mm-hmm. Progressed into VHS. I hated when I would edit on VHS. You get these rainbows that would come through the camera.
Yeah, I like that. Now that's like a style.
Yeah, it's like a style. But at the time, it was like the worst thing you wanted was a copy of the movie, because the copy always looked worse. All that stuff.
That's true.
But as that progression, it never had. And this is where maybe I'm not like a true filmmaker, because I wasn't so much worried about the story. I just wanted my video to look like what I saw in the film. And once I switched that dial to 24 frames on this is on my T2i. Switched it to 24 frames a second, and then I was like, tick, 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 tick. All right, let's hit record. And I was like, oh my goodness, there it is. That's the look. And it looks, and it was almost like, it was like that era, if you remember, everything was way out of focus. Like, there was so much depth of field, it was like too overdone. But we had to learn. We learned the hard way. But that's where I'm like, nope. Yeah, I'm totally like, I needed that. I wanted that look.
It's like kids nowadays can relate to it. It's like the modern day Instagram, like the early Instagram adopters. Like, everybody had a filter, even though you didn't need one. You know, everybody had the borders and all that stuff to recreate the old photographic look, but digitally, right? I mean, depth of field was that for digital filmmakers. And so that was kind of the turning point for me, was like, oh, I could totally abandon film school. I don't need that, because now I have my greasy paws on this technology. Now it was like, now let's focus on a story and you know, make my money back with all this gear. Mm-hmm. It became that, and I'm still kind of chasing that right now, man. But following your YouTube videos, there was a while where I consumed nothing but Newman Films content and Film Riot content, and guys like you, who were my film school. Like, without you guys, I don't know if I would have even thought it was possible. And I don't even think that was your intent at the time, was let's encourage these filmmakers to go out and make stuff, because you were also going out and making stuff for the first time too at that scale. Can you recall at that time what was going on through your head?
Yeah, a couple of things. Well, because like, there was a couple, I know the idea that I did the tutorial that I mentioned about where you run around, the person runs around the camera. That was an idea I came up with when I was in high school years before. Like, it was just an idea. I'm like, I think this would be so cool, because like the Gary Shandling show, that was super old.
And that's not the Larry Sanders show.
Oh wait, Gary Shandling.
Because
it's Gary Shandling.
It's Gary Shandling, because he had a sort of like a sitcom variety
Yeah,
show. That one, right?
And I could be mixed up with the name, but it was that.
No, but he played a character named Larry Sanders.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's another thing.
I know but I was young enough where it was just like this cool idea that I got the reference
So it was
from.
the original Gary Shandling show?
I think so,
That's
yeah.
crazy. That's awesome.
It's old school. But that carried over where I finally was able to do a tutorial. I'm like, oh, wow, this is a cool idea. And I don't want to lose perspective of the question you asked, but I'm thinking of, it was building in my mind of like, okay, I can recreate these things that I've actually been thinking about for the past 10 years.
Yeah.
I have a couple more ideas, but I knew that I was also limited to, well, I'm not actually doing this actively. Like, I'm not like making a film next week, and this is like when that was the stuff I was seeing on YouTube. I would watch the guys and I'm like, oh wow, like Newman Films, like they're actually making a feature, a little short or whatever it would be, and they're using these tricks they're sharing, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna fake it. I'm gonna make it look like I understand how this concept works. I'm going to show how this camera rig is going to be really useful. Mm-hmm. The camera rigs I actually did use, but I was using them as I was building them, so it was still fresh. And I felt like I put all these rules, I gave them to myself, where I'm like, I shouldn't really do a tutorial on something I haven't really experienced a lot of. And I'm like, why?
You were thinking about that then?
Yeah, so that started right away, because I was just like, I feel like I'm sort of like lying in a way, because some of my ideas are just ideas I just came up with, and they happen to work.
Yeah.
And some of them I'm like, I did this, and I still never did a tutorial on it. I did a camera cage that I thought was pretty cool, but I never used it ever. And it still sits in my house. I have a couple of them built. But I'm like, I've never used it, so I shouldn't show how to use it, because I assumed other people wouldn't use it, but I don't. I do different productions than other people. Like, I don't do skateboarding videos. Maybe it's perfect for that. But those are the things that I was thinking. I don't know if that was that the actual question?
Yeah, man, I can recall thinking I was all that in 2011, going on my first indie film set, and they put out like a Craigslist ad, and they're like, hey, we're looking for volunteers, like boom operators. And I said, hey, I'll do, what do you guys need? We need a boom operator. I said, cool, I'll do that. I had a microphone, I had an H4n, but I didn't have a boom pole. And so I remember, I don't know who, maybe it was you, but maybe it wasn't. I remember YouTubing like, hey, how do you DIY boom pole? And I found, like those rolling paint sticks.
Yeah.
I found, use that as a boom pole. And I was like, I have one. And so I went to this film set with that, with the rolling paint, how you paint drywall or whatever, that, kind of stick like handle for the listeners. And I put my microphone on that, and I was like, cool, like, I'm here. And I remember the director was like so embarrassed, and I didn't know how ghetto that was, or how ghetto that was going to be. and I was like, let's do it. DIY filmmaker all the way. And she was just like, Knives, we have a boom pole, so we have one you can use. And I was like, oh, okay. But I lived it. I breathed it, man. Like, I was a DIY filmmaker. I didn't care. Like, to me, it was like, are you too good where you don't need my help? Like, this isn't okay? But now I feel like if I were to create like that little cage that you said, and I were to take it, now I feel like I would be judged if it wasn't, $1,000. Like, it has to look legit and official, because now everybody's a content creator and everybody's getting paid. Now it has to look really, really legit. So I feel like I would be laughed out of the building if today I walked in with a paint roller boom pole. But at the time, man, I thought I was cutting edge.
And that's funny, like that little adapter, I have one in the car. I made one, and I've always had it in my car. Always.
A boom pole?
It's not the boom pole. It's just the stick. There was a little tutorial I saw where you take the handle part, you cut it, and you put a quarter 20 screw. There was this little screw that you could get a quarter 20 at one end, and the other end's a screw, and you just use a wrench. And that little handle then becomes a handle that has the receiving end can go on a painter's pole, and the other end a mic can mount to.
That's right.
And I've never used it, but I've always had it, because I thought, worst case scenario, I can grab it and use it. Yeah. But I know I thought about, this doesn't look that professional. I sort of tried to decorate it so it would. But that's interesting, though, that you actually just did it, and you're just like, I got one. I'm good.
I'll tell you, man, like, true story. This just happened today. I'm in Washington, D.C., recording some podcasts, and you had made a mention when you came into the hotel room, like, wow, like your setup, like it looks pretty complex. And I'm like, oh, this doesn't look too complex, but there are wires running all over the place. And I was getting a little overwhelmed, like setting up my podcast, because I was in a very, very small room, like so small, like it must have been like a 6x6, like, and I set it up with 3 people in there, right? And my whole setup just looked so messy, and there's so wires all over the place. And I said to myself, I was alone in this room, and I said to myself today, Knives, you ghetto fuck. Because all this stuff like should be more streamlined. It should look more professional. But deep down inside, man, I'm like, but I'm going to get it done. I don't care if it looks great. Like, I'm going to cross that finish line. Every piece of content is like scaling a mountain. It's finishing a marathon. And I don't care if it's ugly sometimes. Like, I'm going to do it. And I'll be honest, sometimes that's to my detriment, man. But I still carry that indie spirit of, I will be that guy. I'm like, it's 2018. I'm 30 years old. I'm not above going inside a shopping cart to get that shot. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah.
I'm still that guy deep down inside. And it might be your fault a little bit.
Well, that's cool. And see, that's the thing. Like, maybe this is like all the honesty where I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Now, that's where when I think about, like, that's awesome that some of the stuff I've been able to share has been helpful for you. Because I know I'm like, that was my intent, but like I never said it in the videos, but I kind of want to be like, I've never actually done this myself, and I don't know if I ever will, but I think it'll be good for you guys. It's sort of like I'm the guy that's in the tackle shop.
But MacGyver would never say that.
Yeah, so that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, I think logically this should work. Here you go. Good luck. That's why I was joking. I'm like, I should call my channel the Hypothetical Filmmaker. Like everything was just like a theory. Like in theory, this would be the ideal setup.
Right.
There's irrelevant now. But there's always been this tutorial I wish I would have done, which was I was going to do a boom pull camera, but there was this little, you could get them on eBay. It was a little wireless surveillance camera you could buy, and it had a wireless receiver, and it was like a little thing. But I was going to mount it in my DIY viewfinder and with a mirror, so I could actually have a remote LCD screen.
Yeah.
I could see it, but it would basically just be a camera pointed at the LCD screen. Super ghetto.
Yeah.
But at the time, this was like 2010. That would have been pretty cutting edge to have a wireless LCD. Never did.
Because that would have cost, what, $2,000, $3,000 minimum?
My setup would have cost like $100 total.
Yeah.
But anyways,
that's what it was all about, man.
Yeah.
It was about at the time, and I think it still is. Like, I look at your modern filmmakers today as the new garage band. And to me, hey, if you want to make music, well, then you go to the pawn shop and you get whatever guitar you find, and you make it work, man. I'm not above being super fancy, and as a kid and being younger, like I never felt like I needed all the right things before I could do something. I never felt like, okay, I need all the right gear. I need everything to be perfect before I could do something. I just wanted to do it so bad. And still to this day, like I will sacrifice a YouTube thumbnail because I just want it to be up already so bad. I'll just put drag and drop whatever, thumbnail I can think of and put whatever I want for the title sometimes, much to my detriment, because I just want it to be up so bad. I still care about that.
See, that's I think the opposite of that. So I'm stuck on the other end where I'm like, it needs to be perfect, and that's where years go by, and I'm still talking about an LCD viewfinder that doesn't exist. There's no relevance or use for it, but I'm like, I think it'd be cool because I wanted it to be exactly, and I should have just literally just drew a picture on a chalkboard and said, I think this would be cool, guys. Thanks for watching, and have that be the whole video. And that way, at least the idea would be out there floating around.
Yeah.
But yeah, that definitely, I think to just get it out there, you might kick yourself and be like, ooh, and maybe cringe later.
Sometimes.
But that's where I'm like, that's sort of like that better to love and lost mentality. It's like, is it better to cringe, or is it better to have a conversation about a woulda? Hey, I woulda, or I should have done this. Oh, that's cool. I did do that. It just wasn't that good. Oh, wait, you did do it? Can I watch it?
I saw this movie the other day, and Woody Harrelson said, I rather go for the win and lose by 100 points than get so close to being 5 points away, but saying, but we should have went for the win. You know what I mean? And to me, that's I'm that kind of competitive with myself, or aggressive, or we were talking about this when we were having dinner right now.
Fancy dinner.
Super fancy, and a lot of technicality went into those burgers. I'll say
they were really good, by the way.
They were good. I was just thinking, shit, I lost my train of thought there. No, it's all good. I was just thinking about that food, because I had medium and you had medium well, but man, medium, I wouldn't regret that. I'd do that again.
Going all in, I think, is something that Woody Harrelson, he's winning. He'd rather try to win than to. Oh no.
No, it's all good. I don't know.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. This is all part of the magic, man. It happens. I had a brain fart, but so I did want to ask, going back to, I think I figured out. I think we jumped a lot, like you going from being a kid and finding these heroes and trying new filmmaking things out to doing your YouTube channel. What was in between that?
That's a good question. Good question. Everything, and I did jump around a little bit because as you were even talking, I'm like getting images.
We're just so comfortable that I think now we can skip all that, and so we kind of just went to third base. But let's go back to second for a second. And what was in between before YouTube for you?
So, yeah, the main thing was YouTube doesn't exist. The idea of it, that concept of it, there was no, for me at least, I didn't even imagine it could be a thing. So it was all about, all right, I want to start making videos for public access. That's the access that I have abilities to get onto. I can find that's one channel every city has. You pay, like in my city, it was $25. Even though it was supposed to be free, you had to pay a service charge for handling. And I'm like, oh man, I'll figure out a way to do it. Prior to that, when I went to school in Art Institute of Pittsburgh for 2 years, and it was like it was a good degree.
So you have a degree.
It's a degree, and it's called a specialized associate's degree. And this is something that always stays with me. When I was filling out this form at the end of the year, I asked my teacher, I'm like, what is my degree? And he's like, just write associate's degree. I'm like, wait, what is my degree? Like, he just waved it off. It's called a specialized associate because it was sort of like hyper-focused on video production.
I see.
But it was in the era where they were transitioning off of VHS, but they didn't have new machines. So we learned everything on beta, tapes, and VHS. So we had one Avid editor. And so that was like, hey, this is going to be the standard issue. And so I have an education in analog editing mostly. But anyways, so I did that. But this was I thought, like, wait a second, going back, my buddy John, he had a public access show in New York years before he went to school, like when he was in high school. So he kept submitting tapes and they kept airing stuff. In college, we started doing stuff. And so locally in Pittsburgh, they have a public access. So we started submitting our little skits and shows. This is all in VHS and stuff that some of the stuff were just school projects. We're like, let's just put it on. So that was still there. So that is the in-between leading up. That was way back though. It's like 1998. So this is way before YouTube. But at the time it was like, okay, public access, a couple more years. We're going to eventually maybe make a film or maybe have a paid access and maybe have commercial breaks and all this stuff. But nothing happened because it was just that era of like the internet was dial-up internet. There was no way to upload videos unless you had a server and a way to upload videos to your own website.
That's right.
So 1999 came, 2000, 2001, 2002. I'm like, okay, I'm a couple years out of college. I'm trying to get like legitimate work. So it kind of switched into, I just got to get a video job. I'm the only one in my family with a degree. And they're, meanwhile, most of them earning tons of money because they just worked right out of high school, and so they're working their way up. And I'm like coming in with this diploma, working and trying to submit it into a creative
And
job.
you're in Ohio right now?
Yeah, it's in Ohio. So that's probably going like too detailed. But basically, my focus wasn't about I'm going to make movies. It was about I have to find a job because my student loans cost a lot of money every month, and I ended up working back on my old job, which was like valet parking cars. And it was cool because I'd have downtime. I remember it wasn't a laptop, but it was a computer in the office. And I would just sit there during the downtime and I would just write up all these to-do lists. So I'm like, oh, and I started to learn how to design websites and stuff. So then my focus shifted back to the graphic and art design stuff. Yeah. Because I'm like, I can't make a movie or anything, but I can write storyboards and I can. So that's sort of where the in-between. And then all of a sudden YouTube came out and my friend's like, hey, check out the same guy, John. Hey, Dave, check out this channel. It's called YouTube. I'm like, sounds kind of like, is it porn? Just tell me, is it porn? He's like, no, it's a channel you can upload stuff. And it was weird because I wish I would have, like, I didn't know at the time to document it, but I wish I would have just recorded with whatever device and said, okay, here's the deal. Because it was literally within like 2 days, I saw the site and I was like, that's pretty cool. And then I'm like, I'll create an account and I uploaded something to it. And in those days, I don't know if it was 2005. Did you know YouTube back then?
Yeah, I did.
So they had their main screen. I'll describe it for those that don't know. Like their main screen would be up, and when you would upload a video, you'd see your thumbnail sort of like push across the screen, and it would get pushed by a new upload. And I remember it was kind of embarrassing.
Oh, hell yeah, those were the days.
It was like brand new. So I remember I emailed the company because I thought they were still like a small company. They were sort of small compared to now.
This is before Google.
And so this is where everything went on pause, and I'm like, this is so cool. And I'm like, hey, YouTube, I love your this idea. If you send me a shirt, I would totally wear it and promote your company. Like I wrote them because I was like, hey, this is cool.
Yeah.
But that's when it suddenly, and I didn't even think about that millions of people might watch it. I just thought it was cool that it was like, whoa, this is a service I can upload for free. Because up until then, it was like, pay $10 a month and you can have our internet service and you can upload 300 megabytes per month or whatever. And it was like these weird like things. And this is all still like, I think I was still on dial-up back then. But anyways, that's all the details there. My shift was all the idea sort of shifted with YouTube. I'm like, okay, I was doing graphic design. I always still had interest in video, but there was no output. Wasn't making movies or anything. And so that was like, I guess the longest story is to say, as soon as YouTube hit, I'm like, wait a second, I don't have to move to California. I thought up until then, because when I graduated college, me and my buddy moved to Florida. If you're familiar with Full Sail College, are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I have a friend that graduated there with a master's in film.
Great. What's he doing now?
He hasn't made a movie yet, and I feel like such a jerk because every few months I say, I've challenged him a few times, and Sven, I'm sure he's gonna hear this. Make something, man. If you do want to make movies, I mean, you got a nice degree, you got the brain, just make it. But yeah, Full Sail, and he's got a master's degree in film, man.
Well, I jumped around, but I graduated college, went to Florida because I had two friends that went down there, and one of them, they both were going to Full Sail. And
so you moved to Florida for a little bit?
I moved to Florida. I have cousins there, and I'm like, this is my move. I wasn't willing to I wasn't going to go to California, but I'm like, I'll go to Florida. There's productions down there. Clarissa Explains It All, Universal Studios. Like, I know these Nickelodeon shows. Meanwhile, those shows have been off the air for years.
Yeah.
They don't make productions down there. I didn't know this until I moved there. And I'm like, Universal Studios is really just a tourist attraction. They don't. They have a couple. At the time, they had a roller derby show, I think, called Roller Girls or Roller something. But I got there, and then I realized Full Sail is not Art Institute of Pittsburgh. Like, it is like a legit school. You can't even go inside the school without like a badge. Yeah. My old school in Pittsburgh, it was just like the downtown. You just walk in. Hey, how you doing? You say hi to the security guard. That was the security. Yeah. And so anyone could come and go. And it was like, I thought, we're going to get to Florida. We'll be able to use all their equipment. Maybe then we'll be surrounded by all these filmmakers. And it didn't work out like that at all because our friends sort of disbanded from us. They became friends with their friends in college. And so I didn't make any videos. I hung out with some improv troupe. I videotaped their improv like shows, which was pretty fun. But nothing ever happened to those videos. They were just for like internal use. Like they would just show their friends and stuff. But that was as much filmmaking as I did. We did a couple skits with them. I remember going out with them and I thought, oh, this is it. This will be the thing. Yeah. I'll follow the improv troupe around. Because at the time back then, I'm trying to think what was on MTV. There was a show called The Human Giant. I think that was around that era, I think. And so I was like, well, we know real life improv people. This is like our version. We'll get famous with them.
Am I wrong or was that
later? Did it come later?
What's his name?
There was the other one.
Aziz was on that Human Giant.
Yes.
Yeah, that's where he broke.
Okay. Yeah, and there was another group called, can't think of the name of it. They were an improv group, Upright Citizens Brigade.
That's right. They're huge.
And so our idea was like, these guys were hilarious. And this is all before there was no cell phones. I didn't have a cell phone. And I was like, these are our actors and they're improv actors. So we don't even have to write a script. We can just film them do cool, funny things. And that never really went because they were older than us. And it was like this weird thing of, in my mind, going back, I'm like, man, what would it have been like if I had a cell phone? Like if I had an iPhone 4 even with internet connection. Yeah. It's a whole different era now. But back then, so like it was just barely, I remember using the payphone at our apartment complex because I couldn't afford. That's right. It was the 1010-220 dial around. So you get like a $1 long distance call. Do you remember those?
I remember those. Yeah.
It's a little bit before your time, but that was like how you called home. Like, okay. And then we wouldn't even do it. We would just do a run.
I remember like 1-800-COLLECT.
Okay. And you could do those, but I would hang up, get my quarter back or my dollar back or whatever. Yeah. And then they would call the
that's
smart.
That's smart.
It was like, because I couldn't afford $1.
Hell yeah.
Anyways, those are all those details. But the improv group, that was the closest to almost doing a film. There was a film festival down there. I didn't submit anything to. My buddy did, but he didn't even submit his real film that he made. He submitted a film that he made in college. I see. But it was like, oh, we're in the community. We're hanging out with filmmakers. And it just died off because it was no connectivity. Because we were pretty young, fresh out of college. There was no real... I didn't have a cell phone. There was no like blogs or forums like the Frugal Filmmaker or something like that, to
Yeah.
really lock into. So it was just like, if the guys didn't like you, they just didn't call you, and you just never got invited to anything. So anyways, got back from Florida a year after that. I was like, all right, I'm going back to Ohio, blah, 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 blah. YouTube happens, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is it. I can work from home.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't like the YouTube today. This is where I don't know who might be listening to this.
I forgot about, you were on the homepage and then you were pushed on. I totally forgot about that.
And at the time, it came up, and I don't know how many years later, there was a girl named Brookers. Are you familiar with Brookers?
No.
Okay, so she would have already been unpopular. She was really popular. She was this girl, and she was...
Wow.
The word vlog wasn't really, at least in my world, watching
Yeah.
YouTube, I didn't know vlog.
I remember the word vlog when it was the wackest thing to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so Brookers was like this normal girl, or she wasn't normal. She made the weirdest videos. To go back, you can track her down and watch some of her old videos. They're not that funny in today's standards.
Okay.
But at the time, it was like, this is like a girl, and she's making the funniest little movies just by herself with like little army men being weird. And all of a sudden, I think it was John Daly. Wait, The Daily Show. Not John Daly.
Jon Stewart.
Wait, not Jon Stewart. Sorry. Who's the guy that dated Jennifer Love Hewitt? Or maybe they were married at one point.
I don't know.
He's like I think he was on TRL or something. He was the host.
Carson Daly.
Carson Daly.
I see.
Carson Daly
Mm-hmm.
fronted a YouTube type show. Did you remember this at all? It was a whole channel for videos that you could upload. Anyways, Brookers was popular enough on YouTube that she was the face for this new channel that they were.
How about that?
I say channel. It wasn't through YouTube. It was its own website.
Yeah.
And it's obviously
Yeah,
died
it
out.
didn't work, yeah.
But that was a huge deal. I remember her making a video like, guys, I'm so excited. I don't know. I hope this doesn't change what happens here on YouTube. And then obviously like a year later, it was like, what? Who? What? Who?
Yeah.
But anyways, so her, I think specifically, it shifted my interest where I'm like, oh, I could just make funny little skits.
Yeah.
And obviously, like I don't think it was monetized back then. So it wasn't even about monetization. It was just about being able to
People can see
show
it.
my videos. And suddenly, so I think that wall of the internet
Yeah.
shifted from when I was a kid. I didn't want anyone to see my stuff unless I knew them. But then I was like, well, I don't know who these people are. I would love for a huge audience to
And
watch
they don't know
my
who
stuff.
you are, so they just know the thing.
So that did shift for me because I'm like, I would love for like hundreds of people or thousands of people to watch this. So I still never uploaded anything. I mean, I uploaded that one video that I did, which was like an old montage of some old family videos, and ended up getting flagged years later for music because it had like a popular song on it. Because that's the other thing. I was like, I graduated college, but still had no comprehension of copyrighted music in the public domain. I'm like, wait, all the cool music is music I know. How am I supposed to upload or how am I supposed to make a video without royalty free? That's a new word for me.
Yeah. Do you recall, this is such a nerdy tech question, but do you recall the first video that you uploaded on YouTube and how you edited it and what it was shot on?
Yes.
What's that?
All right, Movie Maker. Was
Movie
the
Maker.
editing
I was
software
hoping
of
you'd
choice.
say that. Yeah.
Yes, and Movie Maker came in handy on lots of occasions. Well, actually, for that one specifically, because I edited it in Movie Maker, WMV.
Mm-hmm.
That was how you dealt with everything.
WMV.
Because Real Player was like a pain in the butt. That was the software. And I don't know. Hopefully, this is interesting.
I hate Real Player.
I feel like, man, this is what it's like. It's just a bunch of old people talking about the 2000s.
That's what it was, man. Eat it.
But-
That's what it was.
Yeah, Movie Maker. I really liked the software. It worked. It was a free thing. I didn't have any other software.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember how how did I get it? Oh, that was my first big investment. That was my maxed out credit card. I built an editing computer. So I got this thing called a Cannabis card. And the unique thing about it was it had RCA jacks on it. So you could actually plug a VCR into this thing
Holy.
and input VCR into the computer.
Wow.
So that's how I got the footage on there. I filmed on VHS.
Yeah.
And then I inloaded. So, but this computer cost like $2,000 to set up. So it was
Yeah.
a $2,000 computer, and it barely could handle this video footage.
I
But
can only imagine.
yeah, in year 2000, it was like, for me, it was like, this is a big deal. And I had a mini DV camera, and so it also had a firewire port. So that was the other input. So it was like, wow, RCA. At the time, that's me just being very limited. I was like, well, VCRs are going to be around for years, and I'm going to need
Right.
this.
We didn't know.
It was dying out quick, but
Yeah.
yeah. So Movie Maker, that was my thing. What did you start out on yours?
I was editing on 2 VCRs from VCR to VCR, and I would record. I'd make like these title cards on Paint and then Film My Television, and those are my title cards. I mean, it was just, I'm talking ghetto of the ghetto of the ghetto. And then I moved on to, just like you, I got a laptop with my church's chicken money, and Windows Movie Maker was on it, as well as, the WMVs, which I still have an original WMV, like 10 videos that I still have them. And you need VLC player to play them. But, man, boy, do I love those files. I hold on to them because they were made 13 years ago on a laptop from so long ago, and I still have them, and they're so old. Like WMV, like you couldn't create that codec today if you wanted, unless you had that old technology. But I know this is very nerdy, but for people that remember, man, like you weren't the only one that had to go through that. You had mentioned something I wanted to touch up on about your valet gig. And I think I just wanted to say that there's so many filmmakers out there and creative people who are working something like a valet gig where they cannot wait till they go on their break so they can go on a computer or do something like that. And I think that's a tremendous time for everybody to daydream when you're working a job that you don't see yourself staying at forever. And I've been there. I was there just a few years ago working a job that it was just the best place to daydream. And for everybody that's still there and that is at there, enjoy it and write all your to-do lists down and write all your lists down. And that's where you're going to get a bulk of your creativity when it's your soul trying to leave your body and think of something else, and there's nothing else you'd rather do than to create. I think the smaller your sandbox is, like the greater that could be for your creativity. The bigger the sandbox, the more options you have, that could be the death to creativity. So that's just something I wanted to touch up on, man. As we're wrapping up here, where are you, Dave Knop, at right now? And where do you see yourself? I know that's kind of cliche. I'm not asking for a 5-year plan or anything, but in terms of the future, now we're in a post-Vine world. I love your Snapchats and your Snapchat content, your videos, where you cross-pollinate and you take a Snapchat thing here, and then you put it on Instagram. And where we are at today, the options are limitless, and the technology, being able to do what we're doing right now, would have cost $100,000. 20 years ago. So the president didn't have this. We have this. It's an incredible time to be a filmmaker, to be a creative. Where do you see yourself in the future? Where do you want to go, provided that you have a little bit of generosity and luck sprinkled along your way?
Good question. A few seconds I've had to think about this because I know, like, for me right now, if I had to just go with my gut, definitely I know what I want to like pursue is, so like in my mind of like, oh, moving out to California and I'll be a gaffer for 20 years. I'm past that. I'm not interested in that. I know even before hearing like my impact and just those tutorials that have affected you, I still know that I want that to exist. That's the main thing. I want to be able to share ideas that inspire people. I think there's definitely been, and that's where I'm like, all right, I had a little hiccup where I sort of, it's easy to get caught up in like, whoa, people like me. This is so cool. I'm a cool person. And it becomes about me, but that's so like short-lived compared to when I go back and watch some older tutorials and I still get a comment here and there, and I'm like, oh, it's still affecting people in a positive way. Wow. So I know that I would say in inspiring and educating people with the stuff that I at least, just because I feel like, and hopefully it's not a depressing thing, but I'm like, there's certain things I don't care as much about. Like, I don't really want to necessarily move to California and make that film. I always say move to California, but just that idea of like, I want to have this big Hollywood. Like,
that's somebody else's dream.
And there's definitely things that I'm like, I still want to tell some stories and do some actual films, but I'm like, I'm okay with the timeline not necessarily happening right now. But that's so to answer that, that's for sure. I know going into this, thinking back, it's funny, I do linger a lot, and I'm stuck in like a 10-year, like, I really live in the 2011 era of YouTube. And every time I create a video or something, I'm like, oh, wait a second, this is like for a different group, and then I try to modify it instead of just being true to just saying, it is what it is, whatever.
So you got to give like the trolls on Reddit and 4chan like their credit, because they're always on the cutting edge. They're always on the They're always on the hot topic before we even know what it is, and by the time we figure it out, it's too late. So you have something really amazing going on in a couple of days.
Oh yeah. That's right.
Go ahead and tell the listeners the story about that, because I think it's fascinating, and I'm jealous because, you know, I still want to produce something on 35 millimeter, on 16 millimeter, on 8 millimeter. I still want to make something on celluloid film, and you actually had the opportunity to do that. So fill us in on that.
There's a short, excuse me. There's a short film festival. I think is that what you call it? Yeah. It's a Super 8 film festival. And it consists of a bunch of filmmakers submit into this. And it's a really unique setup. It's called the Super Great Film Festival. It's in Harrisonburg, Virginia. And this has been going on, I think, almost 14 years. I just recently, within the last 2 years, have come to know about it. But you have one roll of film, which is about 3.5 minutes worth of film. And they give you a camera. They supply it for you. You have to pay this fee to cover all the expenses of the developing of the film, which is around $80 or so.
Not bad.
And it seems kind of expensive, but like the process of, you basically put the camera roll in and you film your film. Mm-hmm. But unlike other film festivals where you get it processed, get the film back, and then cut it, everything needs to be done in camera. So everything has to be, like I say, linear in the sense of, if you want to change locations, you have to physically shoot the next shot at the other location, and which was so reminiscent, because that's how I used to shoot. Did you ever shoot like that, like in camera editing?
Of course.
So right away, I'm like, oh, this is cool. But the only problem is, or I shouldn't say problem, you record your audio separately. So that it makes it complicated, because you have to figure out either a very strategic or very diligent way of writing every second that you hit the record button. As soon as you start hearing the clicking, you have to write down those seconds. Well, the other option is to just do a digital video recording and then mic it, and then you have like this reference video, which actually is how I did it, but I always end up going all the technical details. But anyways, long story short though, long story longer is, you have these videos, they're actual films. What am I saying? These are legitimate films that the filmmakers themselves don't see until the release day of the festival. So that, I think, is the coolest part, because
that is the coolest
part.
So
in a couple of days, and depending on when you'll be listening to this might have already happened, but all these filmmakers are going to gather in for a 2-day event. You get to submit your movie poster. So there's a bunch of 11 by 14 little movie posters lining the walls.
That's so
cool.
It's
like a little mini film festival, which is really cool. Like, that's the stuff that I'm like, oh, okay, this is the closest thing that I've gotten as far as creating a film. And so I think the coolest thing is that nobody, other than the few people that work the actual behind the scenes people, they're the ones that cut the videos or the films together with the audio. So they actually have already, obviously they set up the lineup, so they've previewed all the films, but the majority of people have not seen it. And I think it's so awesome. The unique thing about the Super Great Film Festival is that the filmmakers themselves, it's their first presentation. So they're actually, even though they know all the stuff that's been shot, you don't know what it's going to look like with film. And I think it's Quentin Tarantino talks a lot about film. And it's actually getting me like, I'm all like out of breath now, because it's like exciting, because it has a life of its own, because it's 18 frames a second. So those 18 separate pictures for every second, and little fragments of dirt, things that are simulated in apps and stuff. But sometimes weird things happen. I know last year I shot some stuff, and the camera itself had lens flare like I've never seen before. That was literally diamond shaped, like four-sided diamond. And I'm like, and it was just like the optics of this cheap 8mm or Super 8 camera. But I'm like, I would have never, like, I could simulate it after seeing it, but I would have never even thought to invent it.
It's alchemy.
And so that element of it is the most exciting thing about the festival itself. I think I've never heard of any other festival that presents the films that way, where the filmmaker themselves haven't seen the final production together. So there, I can breathe now. It gets me all excited. But yeah, I'm super excited.
Yeah,
I tried to have you come down. I know that would be neat to share that. But
well, for me, it's come up. But definitely.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
I'm in Austin, Virginia. And I just happen to be here for a few days, and it sucks. The day where I fly back is the night where you guys are going to have that, and that would have been so cool. Well, I don't know why you couldn't have had it on Wednesday, Dave, but that would have been so cool. I love that. That's still a bucket list thing for me, is to create a movie on on actual film to do that, because that's where the discipline comes in. That's where the real magic comes in, and I will do it one day. And you inspired me, and I can't wait to see the final product when you share it with the world on YouTube. I hope you get a digital version of the film. There's got to be a way to convert it.
Yeah, they do. They send that out.
Oh, that's going to be so awesome, and I can't wait to see that with the sound. And that's amazing, man. So this is the part of the program where you can plug your social media and all that cool stuff for the 3 people that are going to listen to this.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Where can people find you on the internet, man?
For sure, knoptop.com, and that's KNOPTOP.com. It's a website that hasn't been updated too much. So actually, let's just jump over to Twitter. So just use that extension, twitter.com/knoptop. I think I've been trying to get more people over at Twitter.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah, just to because I feel like I can share links and stuff there, but obviously that's that username, knoptop, on all the major social medias.
Instagram. What about Snapchat?
No, Snapchat is fading.
Really?
Yeah, that's a whole nother podcast in itself. And I'm just trying to.
We'll save that for the next one.
Trying to plug all the holes, and I felt like Snapchat was cool, but it was distracting me.
Is Snapchat dead?
Not dead, but I know for me it's more of a distraction currently. I love the zoom feature with the iPhone. You can just push
That's
your thumb
the best.
up.
I always think that Instagram can do that. It's just not the same.
No. So yeah, anyways, that's where you can find me. And I know I've been really pushing the Free Time Filmmaker, which is it's a project I've started. I would love for more people to be involved with it. That's primarily on Instagram right now, and I'm trying to condense it to eventually just have it be a daily tips and tricks. So like the same stuff that inspired you, people can get pushed into their phone every day, and they might see something that's like, oh, that's a neat idea. I can use that.
And where can people find that?
That's Instagram.com/freetimefilmmaker or freetimefilmmaker.com.
Or at Freetime Filmmaker.
Yeah, that's the easiest way. Yeah.
For Instagram.
Right.
That's awesome. Guys, everybody listening, I love Dave Knop. He drove 2 hours through Virginia to hang out with me tonight. Here we are recording a podcast. It's 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And this was so much fun, man. And we're going to do a part 2, a part 3, a part 4. I hope you're a recurring guest on this show. I hope one day when you create your own podcast, I'm a guest on that podcast as well. We'll do it again. And I'm sure it'll be much more organized. And I'm sure you'll struggle with uploading that because it has to be perfect.
Yes.
But I look forward to that, man. And I'm grateful, if I can get a little Christian-y on here. Like, I'm grateful God put you in my life. Because, I mean, honestly, man, like, I just need more Dave Knop's, people like Dave Knop. I need more of their phone numbers in my phone. Because when shit is weird, I can give you a call. And when I know I'm in Austin traffic for 4 hours, I can give you a call. There'd be no pipe dream without you, because I'd work through these ideas. And Steve Jobs has this quote where he can recall being a little kid, and he had this neighbor that had this rock polisher machine, and he would tell little Steve Jobs, hey, bring all these dirty stones. And he'd bring these stones, and they'd put like rock polish inside this like can, and they'd shake the can, and he'd be like, come back tomorrow. Steve Jobs' little kid would come back tomorrow, and it'd be these polished stones. And Steve Jobs realized as a little kid, wow, that friction and that noise and that shaking of the can with that oil created these real polished stones. That they were these stones this entire time. And it taught him, like, wow, like friction kind of like can create diamonds pretty much. And I feel like anytime I have a good idea, I can call up Dave Knop and run it by you, and it's like we're polishing those stones together. And because of that, I've been able to sculpt good videos as for the past year, man. So you're a mentor to me, and thank you so much for being on this show, brother. It means a lot.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. It was awesome talking to you too.
We're gonna do it again.
I'm ready.